So I thought it would be a good time to share my testimony, how I came to Christ. I got baptized last year, May last year, 2017, but it's been a long journey before that, and so I just thought I would share my testimony for anyone that's interested. So just to give you some background, I was not born into a Christian family. I heard about Jesus, but in fact we used to sing about Jesus in primary school. We used to sing, "It's great, great, brill, brill, wicked, wicked, skill, skill to have a friend like Jesus." But you know, that was just empty words. There was no context behind it. We used to sing, "My God is great, He's mighty, He's powerful and strong." Now I'm like, yeah. But back then, you know, there was no context. No one even tried to explain who God is, what God is, there was no context there. So, actually, you know, someone put it into really good words for me. It's almost like an immunity shot. You know, where you get a little bit of the disease and then you become immune to it. It's like that. I just heard his name, but without any of the real meat, without any real understanding behind it, and it was just enough to make me immune to it. So from that moment on, me and all of my friends, we were kind of opposed to Christianity, because you see it everywhere. In England particularly, there's churches every 100 meters and they're just empty buildings. You go, you sit in there. As far as I could see, God wasn't there. It was just sitting down for 2 hours, listening to someone speak, being really bored and then leaving. There was no relationship in that. So that was my experience of Christianity. My parents weren't Christian, but we did have a lot of spiritual experiences. So from a young age, I was aware that there was something outside of this realm, right? Like, I won't go into it, but just briefly, we lived in a house, and both my mum and my brother used to see all kinds of things in this house that were inexplicable. So, you know, we were aware that there's probably things that we can't understand outside of this reality. So that was my experience of Christianity. I kind of heard about it, checked it off, like, I don't need to know about that. There's no truth in it. From what I can see, it's just a dead religion. So I was quite comfortable with that. So I went on in life, but I had a heart for truth. And quite early on, me and my friends group, we started getting into alcohol, we started drinking. Not like it was a problem, but we were just like seeking for something outside of that box that you live in when you're in school. And then we got older and we were open to like doing different drugs when we were 16, 17 or so. And when I was 18 or 19, I was on this holiday with my friends. In England we call it a lad's holiday. And anyone familiar with that term can probably imagine what it pertains to, what it consists of. Which is like, you know, getting drunk, chasing after women. But we were a really tight group of friends, and there was just a moment on that holiday when I experienced what at that time I would probably call like spiritual enlightenment. Like, something just switched in my heart and I became in love with my surroundings. I was looking at the mountains and the sea and people's generosity, and I was filled with love, and it became very clear to me that those things that were a priority in my life, like chasing girls and getting drunk and all that stuff, was just, you know, there was so much more above that. That was like nothing, you know, there was so much more. So I set it in my heart that I would, you know, seek after whatever this truth was. And so I deferred university. My second year of university, I basically took a gap year, and I went travelling with some money I'd inherited. I went travelling to South America, and here I discovered all kinds of things. I went travelling with some friends. We were deep into philosophy, and I ended up taking psychedelics with them, all kinds of different stuff. just seeking after that spiritual enlightenment, I went into the Amazon and did something called ayahuasca, this kind of brew of plants which you take to connect with the universe, right? And I did all these kind of things, seeking after this. I was yearning for this truth. And so yeah, that's significant because it led me on this journey of seeking and seeking and seeking. And I learned a lot. I went to Asia, I discovered meditation and Vipassana, all these practices where you could focus your mind, and I started to interact with the spiritual realm, and it became more real to me. I saw that it's definitely real, this spiritual realm. Alongside this pursuit of truth, I was also into conspiracy theories. I was looking into each sector of society, and what I found was no matter where you looked, whether it was the music industry, the economy, financial institutions, every sector of society, the further you looked, the more you saw there was this elite cap on the top of it, hidden from society. And just to put it shortly, they all seemed to worship this entity called Satan, you know, and that was interesting to me because I already had this affirmed in my life, right? Just to go back a bit, someone in my family who I've never met, but it's like my immediate family, they were part of one of these satanic circles, and basically I don't want to go into it too much, but it's really dark. For the sake of this satanic circle, they tried to make a sacrifice, which was extremely disturbing. And so I was aware that this stuff was real. She was speaking in different languages that no one could understand. She was drawing pentagrams in blood and showing a lot of strength, physical strength. And so that seed was kind of planted. I was aware that there was something beyond what we see in this reality. So the more I was looking into these conspiracies, the more I saw that people worshipped this power. And you can see it all in the music industry. You can see the symbolism, it's everywhere, that alludes to Satan. And it's interesting because it all focuses on anti-Christ. It's all like specifically against Jesus, and it's blasphemous against Jesus. Now this was kind of the first thing that led me to Jesus. Like, I kept hearing about people that got out of these societies and they used the name of Jesus, and they were only alive because of Jesus. And I didn't believe in Jesus yet, but I thought it was interesting. I was like, there's something about Jesus, because he kept popping up. And I was kind of sitting on this belief that Jesus was just like one of us, but he'd got to a certain level of enlightenment, and now he was performing how every human should perform, and he was showing us, like, this is how you do it. But it was completely ignorant and arrogant because I hadn't looked into the gospel. I hadn't looked at the records of what Jesus had said. I just made my own assumptions, and I've read so many books from the New Age that touch on who Jesus is and that kind of stuff. I never looked at the gospel, I just wrote it off completely. But this started to catch my interest. I kept hearing about Jesus. So something stood out about Jesus, and I became intrigued by Jesus. I wanted to know who he was. I wanted to know. So eventually I ended up doing this drug called ibogaine. It's a bit like ayahuasca, if you know about that, but basically it's a plant from West Africa that you can take and connect with the universe. And they tell you before to write down 10 questions, anything that you can think of, anything in your mind that you want to ask, because you're, connecting with God. You can ask them anything. So I wrote down 10 questions, And my number one question I wanted to know was, who is Jesus Christ? I wanted to know who he was, who he is. So I had this experience. Basically, you're under the influence of this drug for like 48 hours. And it comes to a point where you can lift up any question. And I was lifting up questions about my family. I was getting in-depth answers. It was giving me memories that I'd forgotten about, that I could apply to these situations. Like lots of advice and information. It was really helping. And I was like, wow. And then it came to the biggest question, the one that I was actually most curious about, which was, who is Jesus Christ? So I lifted it up. I said, what about God? What about this Jesus? Who is Jesus Christ? Nothing. It was silent. Everything else, brought up all this stuff, gave me these thorough solutions, answers to my questions. When I brought up Jesus, it was silent. It couldn't give me an answer. It couldn't even lie to me. It couldn't say anything. So this was another thing that stood out. I was like, what is it about Jesus? Why couldn't this force that was supposedly like helping me, why couldn't it tell me anything about Jesus? And yeah, that's just one of the things that stood out to me and made me even more curious. So I was living in Thailand for around 2 years, and around this time is when I was hearing about Jesus and hearing about people who were saved through his name. And although I didn't believe any of that, yeah, it caught my attention. And around this time is when God placed the gospel into my hands. I was in this kind of new agey second-hand book store / restaurant, and they sold books for like 40 baht, 80 baht, something like that. And I would occasionally get books from there, mostly new age stuff, you know. And then there was this little book, and it said, actually I have it here, it said New Testament, Psalms and Proverbs. And honestly, I was so ignorant to Christianity, I didn't know what that was. I thought it was some scriptures. I thought it was scriptures, but I thought it would be like some poems, some ancient poems that I could meditate on or something like that. So I bought it. It was only like 40 baht, that's nothing. And I took it home, and one way or another I started reading it, and I discovered that it was the gospel. It was the record of Jesus Christ. And I started to read it, this book, and for about 1.5 to 2 years I couldn't stop reading it. Every single day, when I went to bed, when I woke up, I was reading at least a little bit of this book. And I don't know why, it wasn't like it was a discipline, it wasn't like such a desire in my heart that I wanted to read it, but I just couldn't stop reading it. And as I read through it, something in my spirit recognized it as truth, and recognized that Jesus was who he said he was. And that was a turning point for me, is that I thought, if there's a 0.00001% chance that Jesus is who he says he is, that's the most important thing in this universe, and I have to know whether it is or whether it's not the case. I got to that urgency of like, wow, if what he says is true, which is what my spirit was telling me, then this is the most important thing of my whole life. I need to know about this. So that kind of like brought this urgency, and it also completely it rendered all of my previous beliefs on Jesus completely useless. When I was reading this gospel, it just completely dismantled my whole perspective of God, my whole perspective of Jesus and Christianity. Because all I knew is what I saw from the outside, which was ugly. It was just boring and useless. But what I read in here was like alive, and I was like, wow, this is true. Like, I could just sense that it was true. So all of those perceptions and beliefs that I'd kind of received and stood on without actually really seeking, really objectively seeking, like, who is this Jesus guy, got thrown out of the window, completely dismantled. I couldn't hold them with the knowledge of this. And that took me on a journey through these 2 years and kind of just completely rearranged my perspective, and it convicted me of a lot of things that I had to change in my life. And you know, another one of the major turning points was as this guy who was into all of these spirits, I considered everything. I considered Buddha, I considered Hindu scriptures, I read the Bhagavad Gita, I was open to the idea of reincarnation, I was open to the idea of aliens creating us, I was open to all these theories. And then when I kept hearing about Jesus, when Jesus kept popping up, you know, the most convicting thing was that I realized I hadn't considered Jesus. You know, the more I looked into these conspiracies, I saw that people, you know, the dark side, and then I looked to Jesus and I was like, I haven't even looked at that. I'd completely thrown it out without any worthy cause. I didn't have a worthy cause to just be that ignorant, to ignore Jesus. And that convicted me, because I was like, wow, I thought I was this open-minded guy who would consider anything objectively, but I'd completely done the opposite. I'd written off Christianity with no real cause. I hadn't looked into it, I hadn't read the Bible, I hadn't read the gospel. I just assumed that there couldn't be truth there. And that was the turning point. I was like, wow, I'm really not open-minded. I've actually been really ignorant to this. Like, whether it's true or not, I haven't even looked. I've just accepted what people around me have said, and I've accepted largely kind of what society says. And then that also occurred to me, like, why do I trust society? It's messed up, look at it, it's evil. So that was a turning point for me. I started to seek for myself, and I started to read what this book said about Jesus and what Jesus said was recorded to say in the Gospels. And that's when he started to change my heart. That's when he started to renew my mind and dismantle it, and completely shifted my perspective. And that was a gradual process, but it was a gradual process of conviction. And now I'm at a point where what I believed in that first moment when I read this gospel, what the things that I believed that I was reading Jesus talk about, I just knew it was true. I believed it, and now at this stage, I see it every day. It's real. Like, that gospel that I first believed in, I didn't necessarily see in the church. I was going to church, but I didn't necessarily see what I read in here. You know, it was nice for community and friends and stuff, but I didn't see it in what I knew to be true. And only recently, as I've been stepping out in faith and trusting God, and acting on my belief, have I seen that every word that he says in here is true. And he'll back it up, and he'll show you through miraculous signs and wonders. But you have to have a objective, sincere heart. You have to humble yourself and admit that you don't know, that you could be wrong about this reality. You know, if you're willing to consider these Eastern philosophies and don't cut Jesus off out of ignorance, because that's what I did. And I saw that I thought I was this open-minded guy, but actually I wasn't, because I hadn't been open to Christianity. And this is another thing, you know, people think they've considered Christianity, but they've only considered people. It's not about people. It's not about what you see the church doing, it's about Jesus. Because if Jesus is who he says he is who we need to follow. Not the pastor in church, not the priest, not any of that, not the building, none of that. It's Jesus. This is what Christianity is. It's following Jesus, not following a church, not going to a meeting every week. It's about being his body, and that means obeying his commands and being faithful to him. And I promise you, he is faithful to us. And his word says that seek and you will find, ask and you will receive, knock and the door will be opened. And that's exactly what I've experienced. When I really asked from an objective standpoint, without, you know, this tower of prejudice and judgment, I had to level it out. And without this, without the other side of wanting to believe and just being gullible, I was just like, come on, like, let me just read this and have an open heart. And that was all it took. That was enough space for God. He transformed me, He transformed my heart, and now He's leading me every day, leading me through His Word. And it's incredible. You know, you've probably got a belief system already made up about what I'm telling you. But you have to ask yourself, where did that belief system come from? Did it come from a sincere desire to know the truth? Did it come from other people? Did it come from reading the gospel and just thinking, oh, this is definitely not true? Where did it come from? Because I really believe there's nothing more important to consider. Because Jesus was real. There's no doubt about that. No historian disagrees that Jesus wasn't real. That there's so many testimonies of Him healing the sick and doing miraculous signs and wonders. That's just, all historians can agree on that. All scholars can agree on that. He was crucified on the cross. He was witnessed rising from the dead. You know, if you are an atheist, you have to come up with some kind of solution, like, okay, well, they were all of those 500 witnesses, they were just insane, or they were trying to lie. But then, you know, the disciples, they went on and they're recorded dying for this belief. They were dragged by horses to death. They were pulled apart. They were crucified upside down for their belief in Jesus. They stood on the fact that they'd seen Him resurrected from the dead. And then it leads us to, like, yeah, we really need to consider this gospel. If you really consider yourself an open-minded person, look at the gospel. Look at the gospel. Yeah. Don't throw out Jesus without giving Him your sincere attention. And I will make another video going into the gospel, because people hear about Jesus and Jesus dying on the cross and it's just so out of context, you know? But there is understanding to be had. He made it simple so we could grasp it, and there is freedom there. So I'll probably make another video going into the gospel, just simple gospel. Because yeah, you can go into a church for 10 years and not even hear the gospel. You might hear little segments of it, but man, don't look to Christianity. I mean, as we know, as what we know as Christianity, don't look to that. Look to Jesus. If He is who He says He is, you can ask Him directly. Get alone. If there's any part of you, if there's just the smallest part of you that thinks that it could be true, then it's worth putting your whole heart towards that to know for yourself. At least if you put your whole heart towards it and open your heart to it and ask sincerely, and then you find that it's not true, you've looked for yourself and you know. But whatever you do, don't let it pass by without seeking. Don't sit on other people's beliefs or this society's beliefs, because it's the most important matter of all time. So I just want to thank you for listening to my testimony. I pray of anything that it would lead you, that it would spark that desire to know the truth. You cannot consider something without sincerely seeking it out. So I can guarantee most people watching this have some kind of belief about Jesus. And I just want you to question that belief. Have you sought out every possibility? Have you really been open to every possibility? Or have you been led by other people? Have you been led by society? Have you been led by your friends? And I'm saying, don't be led by me, but you've got to seek it out of your heart. You've got to seek it for yourself. Because if you haven't considered Jesus, considered who He is, and you haven't got to the bottom of it, I'm telling you, this is urgent. You need to find out for yourself. Don't let it slip. I love everyone watching. I love you. Bless you. God bless you. And I just want to pray right now that everyone watching who seeks will be led to the truth. And Lord, you will reveal yourself to them through signs, wonders, through people, for videos. Thank you, Lord, for revealing your truth to these people who have a sincere heart for the truth. There's a lot of people out there that know this isn't it. There's more. And we can know the truth. You just keep seeking and I promise you'll find it. You keep seeking with an open heart and God will reveal himself to you. But you have to be open to God. You can't have doors closed. Otherwise, how can you consider something without having an open heart? Yeah. So thank you guys. I love you. God bless. Goodbye.